And from Boston to Ibiza.
A small, medium-sized enterprise.
Yes.
So smaller developers, builders in the greater Boston area.
Mhm.
I actually grew up in the hood, or poor family. And my mom, ended up doing a bunch of different jobs. And so you don't know engineers, you don't know people who work in tech, and barely, I'm old enough that it didn't really exist as an industry then. Hey, I don't want to be poor. I wanted to be in New York City. It was my first choice. You could take 2% of New York, move it down to Miami, and Miami doubles as a financial market. Like, why are you wasting your time at the job when you quit? I'm going to start my career in London because London was so much more international. Going for a run vastly improves your mood, right? Going for the run, going for the gym.
Welcome to Let's Go Deep. My name is Molly Abdoli, and today we're having amazing conversation with Sean Kelly-Rand, who was just flying through London from Boston to Ibiza, not to party, but just work and party a little bit, right?
Maybe a little bit.
So I managed to catch him, and I'm so excited we're having this catch up. But catch up these days with Molly is with all these setups.
Yeah, I know. This is a catch up on video.
Yes. So be ready to let's go deep. So could you please tell me a little bit more about you? You used to work for Lehman Brothers. You are managing a fund now.
Yes.
What else?
Well, I'm originally from Boston, back living in Boston. I lived in London Europe for about a decade. So I come through, have all my friends here, love to, spend a bit of time in Europe running around. But now running a fund back in Boston and, focused on preserving investors' wealth so that they can sleep better at night and enjoy their vacations.
Okay, yes. We will talk about preserving wealth a lot today, I hope.
Yes. That's it.
So is it a real estate fund? No,
It's a real estate credit fund. So we lend to, in the UK, you'd call them SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises.
Yes.
So smaller developers, builders in the greater Boston area. So we're providing them the capital to build and continue to build housing. And for our investors, from their standpoint, we have a senior loan across, 70 to 100 different properties and individuals. So it's a great way for them to kind of invest and earn and preserve their own capital and earn a dividend on it.
So do you lend only to developers based in Boston, or I don't know, Miami as well?
Occasionally we lend. So about 90% of what we do is in the greater Boston area. And then once in a while, there's a developer that we know from Boston or New York. And we say, hey, you know what, they're doing a project in Miami, or we know somebody very well, and we'll do a one-off project in Miami. We've done a few in New York, but really the focus is in the greater Boston area. And we don't really market that we do outside of there. It's just kind of a one-off thing. But those are fun.
It's why Boston. But let's talk about it next time. Tell me more about your story. How did you end up being a fund manager?
Yeah, it really goes back. I grew up in Boston. I actually grew up in the hood. And, it wasn't a wealthy family. It was a relatively moderate, income or poor family at the time. And my dad was a carpenter, and my mom, ended up doing a bunch of different jobs. And one of the jobs she did was selling real estate. And so in between my dad being a carpenter and hanging out with carpenters and builders, and my mom selling houses, it's what I knew. And growing up in, a poor neighborhood, you don't know people who work in finance. You don't know engineers. You don't know people who work in tech. And barely, I'm old enough that it didn't really exist as an industry then. So you didn't really have that there. So the one person that has a lot of wealth in those neighborhoods is the person who owns the properties.
Okay.
And so
I think that was the time as well, no? I mean, I don't know how it was in the US, but I think finance became more popular in the rest of the world like that.
Yeah, and we didn't, again, not that old, but still the internet wasn't a thing. It wasn't, today we have this wide, right? You have these podcasts, you have these, videos, you have these interviews with you, and somebody out there can be anywhere in the world and they can sit down and listen to your podcast and learn from your guest. I didn't have it, right? Yeah. So I learned from, what did I have? I had the people I socialized with outside. And so that was very much a property-centric world. And so I kind of grew up into that and said, hey, I don't want to be poor the rest of my life. I want to have some wealth, and I want to own something. Well, how do I do that? Well, this property was my route into that realm, and then it was kind of tick off into a story of its own. So, I bought my first property. I saved up while I was in college. I actually worked while I was in college and finished up. Yeah. And as soon as I graduated, within basically a few months of graduating college. I'd already saved up enough money while I was working in college and starting work that I bought a house, and I bought a 3-unit building. And I lived in one unit.
That's a pretty good
I
start.
rented out, 2 bedrooms, or I rented out 1 bedroom in my unit and rented out 2 units, and it paid for itself. Plus I got cash out. So that was my, my first foray into it. And I was working in finance at the time because I ended up getting an education in finance. But I always knew I was going to go into, real estate full time. And that took me through. And eventually I said, well, how do I get into this full time?
Yeah.
A lot of my friends from, uni were on Wall Street, and they said, hey, listen, you can either go start all over again and work on Wall Street for an investment bank, or you go back to business school. And I said, well, I don't know if I want to start all over again, and business school sounds kind of fun. And so I went back to business school. I went to Columbia Business School, Columbia, in New York City. I wanted to be in New York City. It was my first choice. I said, the real estate markets are in New York. The banks are in New York. Actions in New York.
Everything's still in New York, no? Like,
it's great. Yeah, as much as people say, hey, things are happening in Miami, and sort of, it's New York City, right? Miami is the small market, and it's great. It's growing, but New York is so large. You can take 2% of New York, move it down to Miami, and Miami doubles as a financial market. But, and then before business school, I had a friend. I grew up. One of the ways my parents kind of like helped pay for our housing and that is we had foreign students from Europe, and they lived at our house to learn English. So they were from all over the world. Well, one of them said, "Hey, they're from Spain." They said, "You're going back to business school. Like, why are you wasting your time at the job? Why don't you quit?" So before business school, I quit 6 months before I started business school. Moved to Madrid. He said, "Take my apartment." Gave me a free apartment. And so I just said, all right, this is great. So I moved to Madrid, and I said, so that's how I ended up in Europe. And I said, well, you know what? Instead of going back, I'm going to finish my education in New York. But after it, I'm going to start my career in London, because London was so much more international. It was, I loved being in Europe. I loved meeting all sorts of interesting people. I just found that, I really fit. And I said those. So anyways, that's a bit of a sidetrack, but
No, I think it's everything. All the sidetracks build up the Sean we are seeing today, right? And how did you end up at Lehman Brothers?
In business school, I actually had an undergraduate in uni. I'd done an internship during the summer at Lehman Brothers in London in their economics division, and I met that firm. I really enjoyed working there. I loved the people I met. And so when I was in business school, and Lehman Brothers at the time, and still now for people who know it, Lehman was, if you look at Goldman Sachs or Lehman, Goldman Sachs was famous for their equity business. Lehman was famous for their debt business. And debt was very similar to real estate. And so if you wanted to be in the real estate business, you had to understand the debt capital markets. And Lehman was an expert there, which made them, in my view, the number one player on the real estate side in the investment banks. And so they were the best at what they did in the industry, from my perspective. They did the most diverse transactions. They did all sorts of interesting things. And it was a really good group of people. It was enjoyable to work there. And that was something that was big for me. I didn't want to go work somewhere where, I've always balanced this out. Like, do you want to focus on making the most amount of money possible, or do you want to make a good amount of money, and really come into work loving what you do? And if I didn't love what I did, and I didn't like working with people, then I wasn't going to last. It's just not me.
How long did you spend there?
I was there till it collapsed. It was about 2 years. I did the internship before, but I started with them in London, and it was about 2 and change years before.
So you would have stayed if they were still.
I probably would still, I don't know if I'd still be there, but I would have been there for a lot longer.
Okay.
But that you learned a lot. I mean, I was there at 2006, watched the craziness of the market, and then 2008 watched it all wash away.
What are the lessons you learned from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, lessons you learn from, from a real estate investor perspective or from a general perspective is, I think it's very interesting. People go back and they just do a quick Google search about the real estate market, where they were back in 2007. What was the news writing back in 2007, right? As things were starting, we now look back and we say, oh, it was so clear things were going to collapse. We go back to 2006 and 2007.
It was beautiful.
It was, people were talking about, I read an article from 2008, New York Times. I looked it up. And they were talking about a bidding war for houses in New York City in 2008. Right? 2008 is the year we think of things collapsing. In 2008, there were bidding wars with people lined upside out of houses in New York City because they weren't sure. And there's people being quoted, I need to buy a property today because if I don't buy it today, I'll never get on the property ladder. Oh. And that was in 2008. It all collapses. It all declines so quickly. And I think people believe that they know when things are going to collapse and when it's going to go down, right? They look at it and they say, oh, I'll be able to figure it out. I will see it. And I think what they talk about, and you talk about black swan events, they talk about these things. I think what happens is that there's a herd mentality going up and there's a herd mentality going down. And when the system, you know, from a financial perspective, when it cleans out, when the drain opens up, it doesn't just go down slowly.
Yeah.
It once it gets going, it goes. And it doesn't happen on one area. You go, well, I have money in the stock market. I have money in real estate. I'll be okay because I have some money here and here. It's all driven by the same things. Yes. And so people got caught, and I watched people that were on top of the world. They were real estate, you know, fund managers or hedge fund managers. They were making millions, and all of a sudden, snap, they've got a lot of expenses and not a lot of income and not a lot of wealth because it was all tied up in very concentrated bets that happened to them find out that they were very correlated.
So main message here you want to send, like, because we are talking about...
The message, the learning is you need to start being cautious and being really thinking about wealth preservation well before you need the money to have been preserved. If you start thinking about being more conservative and investing your funds in a more conservative way or saving up for the metaphorical rainy day, the day it rains, it's too late. The umbrellas are already sold out, right? You need to buy the umbrella before you need it.
Yes.
And so those are the things, I think what people need to think about is, hey, stop. It looks like it's always going to be sunny, but the storm comes very quickly. So make sure financially, in that sense, that you set aside enough liquidity, that you have a plan for a rainy day. You set aside money that is uncorrelated to the market. It's not all in the stock market. If you're working in finance, you shouldn't probably be all invested, right? Think about the Lehman guys. They worked for Lehman Brothers, and a third of their bonuses often and their wealth was tied up in Lehman stock. Imagine what happened to them the day after it collapsed. They lose their job, and they've lost a third of their wealth. And maybe they've also invested in other financial stocks because that's what they know. And they've also invested in real estate because that's what they've known. And all that stuff was correlated to what they did as a day job. And so maybe it's better to take, if you're in tech today and the world is looking great, well, take some time. Diversify into real estate, diversify into bonds, diversify somewhere else that is less correlated to where your day job is. So make sure that when one thing storm hits, it's not affecting everything you have.
Because on this channel, we talk about well-being, and financial well-being is very important because it affects everything. Yes. Yeah. If you're having issues with money,
it's hard. It's hard to go to the gym and focus on going to the gym and getting mental health and a good night's sleep when you're worried about losing your house and whether you can pay the rent. And so I think for your mental health, which then translates into your physical health, because I think it's all related, you got to make sure that you get your financial health, right? And your financial health is not necessarily how much you make, because I think you can be very financially healthy at any level. It's how much stability do you have? How much stability do you have? You know, are you living within your means? And if bumps happen along the road, does it throw you off, right? So, you know, if you lose your job today, are you still healthy? Are you still able to live the lifestyle you're living? Or do you have to stop everything, change everything, which affects your mental health, which then affects your physical health? And I'm sure you've had friends where they've lost their jobs, and some are like, oh, it's fine. I'll go get a job next year. I'm good. And you have friends that are going, oh man, I'm stressed. I'm anxious. I can't. And you see that
breaking, like everything breaks. It's like the domino effect. So to sum up, you say liquidity, diversify, like live by your own means.
Live within your means. Yes. And live well within your means. things.
But this is hard, no? Especially with today's prices, with the lifestyle you're used to already. So what would you recommend?
Yeah, I think it's easier said than done, right? And I think it's also easier. And I think a lot of people get caught up in, social media, right? And I think the message a lot of times in social media is like, what is it? YOLO, or like, spend it now, live it now. Mm-hmm. And I think less it gets lost in the message. And sometimes it gets sent that it's easy to make it. And it's always, fine, you figure it out. I think less, and I think we've just lived in a time for the past 10 years where the markets have gone like this. It's been kind of easy. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's very easy to get caught up with keeping up with the friends and struggling to say no. You know what?
Yes. And with the image you built on social media, today I think it's very important for a lot of people.
And I think but I also think it's healthy to take a step back from that and say, okay, you can do all sorts of healthy things, right? Mm-hmm. You can live a very, great lifestyle. And you can say, hey, you know what? I'm still going to go on vacation. Mm-hmm. I'm just not going to spend. If I don't have 10 grand to send on vacation or only have 10 grand in bank account, maybe I shouldn't send that all on a trip. Maybe I do the trip that's $1,000. Mm-hmm. Maybe I stay home. Maybe I skip one, right? I think it's moderating. It's not, eliminating, right? Any of the things you're doing. It's picking that apartment. It's going, okay, well, what can I afford if things aren't going well?
And, I think another issue in the modern world is dopamine addiction, right? Because we are so used to like life is getting better. We have everything that we need. We have social media, which is like giving us all this dopamine, and traveling and partying and all these things. We want more and more and more. But when to stop?
Yeah.
When to stop and when to check your bank account.
Yeah, check your bank account. But I also think people forget that, like, with this dopamine or the adrenaline or those things, you can get in other ways, right? Yeah. And, we talk about health and wellness. Mm-hmm. It's like going for a run. Vastly improves your mood, right? Going for the run, going for the gym, and it doesn't really cost much.
Yes.
And that's far better, right? Yeah. And so, and I think people are saying, okay, do I spend, a grand on a table in a bottle of champagne to get, some sort of, high and feel great?
Yes.
Or to go to the gym, right? And skip the drinks and go do, some sort of activity, go for a hike. And, go for a hike to the top of the mountain, and you can take your pictures and do some selfies there. But that's good as well. But
Yeah. But I think maybe slowly or not slowly, I think we're moving to that state of mind where it's cooler to like post selfies hiking than cooler to post selfies in a nightclub.
Yeah. I think so. The lighting is better,
That's true. Yes. A life hack from you. So, what do you think about? So, how would you recommend to start building this foundation instead of just spending money on getting this dopamine?
Yeah, and I think you're saving. I think one of the things I wish I'd done earlier, and I think I think we need to talk about partially is it's not just advice. There's some people that are early in their career just earning it, right? And I think that's one side of it. And I think the other part of people are, we were chatting about it about 2008. Well, some of the, kind of the people that were most stressed out about their careers and their finances weren't the junior guys. It was the guys running the hedge fund, right? And, they were making millions and tens of millions, and overnight that disappears, but the expenses didn't. They still had the house in the Hamptons. They still had the second home in France. They still had a place in Miami. They had 3 kids in private school, and they were making millions. Yeah. And those expenses were still there, but the income wasn't. And the cash and liquidity they need to plow back into the business to kind of make sure it kept going, right? Mm-hmm. And so, those things, it's at any level. Yes. And I think one of the things that I wish I'd done earlier, and when we talk about this, is bring on, a wealth manager, a true wealth manager, somebody to advise you. And it's not just about them advising you on your personal finances. It's not them advising, they're not being a stock picker, right? I don't need, I always thought, well, I'm in finance, I have an MBA, I worked in an investment bank, I can invest my own money. It's not about investing your own money. It's not about making money. It's about not losing it. And it's about not losing it because you die and you didn't have it structured correctly, and so your kids are paying twice as much tax as they should. It's about making sure that you've got your trust set up. It's making sure you have your tax structure set up. Making sure that you're thinking about the right domicile, right? So where should you be living? Where shouldn't you be living? You know, how many days a year should you spend in a certain place? And all those things, it's not what you make, it's what you keep in some sense, right? You know, and having somebody advising you on all those things, and then advising you on how to diversify, right? So, you know, not telling you what stocks to pick, but first helping you figure out what your overall, you know, allocation should be. And then is trying to help you diversify based on your own unique situation, right? It's not on me. And I'm not a personal financial advisor in that sense. I'm not a wealth manager, but I did take somebody on, and I'm glad I did. And guess what? I probably paid way too much tax for too long. I probably was at points of career where I didn't have my trust set up correctly, right? Where if I'd passed away, my, you know, daughter would have, you know, not gotten, you know, as much as she would have as, you know, did not, knock on wood, that, you know, I stay alive and healthy for a while. But so I think that's important to take on.
But it's good to have all these things settled, so you sleep better.
Yes. Yeah. And when you sleep better, you perform better and you do well.
Make more money. So
like
the cycle.
And does it really matter, right? You know, at the end of the day, sometimes I think people get very caught up with how much they're making and how much they're earning. But, and do you like what you do? Do you love going into work every day? Are you looking forward to Mondays? And so why make it all if you're not enjoying it, right? Well, just focus on doing what you love doing, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't make money and you can't do it, but if you're really unhappy, that's not good either. What's the point?
What's the point of life? Yes, exactly. So how would you recommend to choose the right wealth manager?
I think, you know, for me, it was important, you know, and this is kind of more how I thought about it, less advice for somebody else, is I thought about it, and I happened to, you know, start working with somebody that had worked in institutions, had a bit of their own wealth, and had bought a wealth manager. And they really understood, one, because they were preserving their own wealth. They were doing it for their own money. They were, you know, very used to investing their own money and preserving their own wealth and preserving themselves. They'd worked at institutions. They weren't selling me a product, right? So I think sometimes people, they weren't, you know, somebody straight out of college, you know, telling me how to pick stocks. They didn't talk to me about my investments. They talked to me about preserving my wealth. They talked to me about preserving my capital. They talked to me about setting it up. They talked to me about, you know, my healthcare. They talked to me about my trust. They talked, you know, real advice, real advisory. Hey, who are your accountants? Let's get, you know, almost think about it as your wealth manager should be your wealth and financial concierge. You know, they aren't necessarily doing everything for you, but they're lining it up. You should be able to call them and say, hey, I need a new accountant. Hey, do you know somebody in this country? I'm moving here. Can you have advice for me on how I should structure my trust? Oh, by the way, I'm getting married. Who does my prenup, right? I mean, how much are you going to lose or, you know, during a divorce, right? You know, thinking about those things well ahead of time, you know, they're kind of there looking on your interest. As you're getting excited about that next move, they're playing that out to make sure that that move is the right one.
And so there is a saying that the first generation makes money, second generation spends it all, and third generation has to start over again. And I think wealth managers creating a trust fund, like structuring it well, also would help for the second generation not to like waste all. And to keep it.
But I'm actually, you know, it's funny that they have that statement. I actually see, you know, dealing with a lot of wealthy families, and we have a lot of wealthy, you know, clients. We're backed by, you know, a family office. We're partnered with the family office. We have a lot of family office and wealthy investors. And what I tend to find is that it's actually the first generation makes it. The second generation is kind of preserving it, right? They're still involved in the business. Like the grandfather,
smart enough.
The grandfather made the money. The son is, you know, he's working hard in it and he's trying to keep up and make it because he wants to be like his grandfather. And the kids sometimes of that, it's the third generation that are kind of like, you know what? We have it already. I don't want to work. I want to enjoy it, right? You know, and maybe that's the right thing for them. Maybe they're like, you know what? I want to enjoy life. That's fine. And they're less worried about it. I hope they don't spend it all. But, but I think it's all individuals. I think the same.
But I think there is some statistics around that as well.
Statistics.
We have to check.
Yeah.
I have to check that. Yes. So how would you recommend to preserve? Like, would you do real estate first and then capital markets? I know we talked about that.
And it's kind of, I think it's each person, like, what do you do during your day, right? Job, right? So if your day job is real estate and finance, maybe your side gig shouldn't be real estate, and that's where, in finance, it shouldn't be tied together. And I think that's where it is, comes down to like having.
But I think people naturally would invest where they understand.
Yeah, they naturally would, but sometimes it's not always the right thing to do, right? I think there's a diversification there because I think we're talking about, again, are we talking about making more money and doing something on the side with your investments to make money? Or are we talking about wealth preservation in a way that you're preserving it for a rainy day, which should be different than what you do on your everyday, right? And I'm not great at that on a personal level, right? Like I'm heavily invested in real estate, both as my, my day job, and then my kind of like, personal wealth is a lot of is tied up in real estate assets. But now when I do outside of that, what my wealth manager is doing is making sure that everything I don't have in there is tied up, and there's a significant amount put aside for a rainy day or in bonds and those type of things.
Okay. So going back to well-being. So how do you make sure that employees, your team, your partner are healthy and in a nice mental health?
Yeah, I think, we focus, my business partner and I are both very healthy people. I think, we put a value on, and we track and we keep track of each other. If my business partner says, hey, I'm going to go out and have, a night out on town or have big drinks, you're going, come on. If he says, hey, I need a mental day for health and I'm going to go run a marathon, you're like, great, go do it. Because I know the next day you're coming in and it's...
Yeah, with more energy.
More energy. Yes. And I think we started doing team events. So, we started doing quite a bit of events where we're doing, this summer my team's doing a triathlon. They're doing it together and everybody signs up and it's voluntary. You can do it, but... But
it's encouraged, right?
But it's encouraged. We're going to pay for it, right? And, I think we're going to do the half marathon. I'm going to do the half marathon. I did it a couple of years ago. My partner will do the full marathon in Miami. And if an employee wants to join, it's great. We'll pay for it, but let's go down to Miami around a marathon, around a sporting event. Well, guess what happens? Well, everybody starts training for the marathon because you're going to that. So you've made an event out of it. But you're now encouraging employee health because you don't want to do it. And then they're doing a hike this summer. Well, it's hiking up a mountain. So everybody's going on that hike. We'll have to start training. And it creates a culture where people want to live a healthy lifestyle. And it doesn't mean that we can't go out and, drink. We can't go out and have a party. We can't do that. But really, the team is built around that. And the people that we attract as employees want to be a part of that. And it's a big part of who we are.
And people perform much better, right?
Yes.
Their hormones will be much better, testosterone level, adrenaline, sleep.
Exactly. And I'm trying to figure out, as a business person, how do I incorporate, and, time is the biggest issue, right? Like, where do you fit it in? You've got a busy day, you're running a company.
Single parenting.
And you're trying to figure out, where do I fit in my gym time and the time to go do social things, right? Because you want to fit in that social atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so... what I've started doing, and a lot of my friends what I've seen them do, especially after the pandemic is coming out and big focus on being social again, is saying, okay, we could either all go meet at a pub, or we could go meet at 6 a.m. for a team run or a team hike.
Amazing. How many people come at 6 a.m.?
A fair number. And I'm not always the one there. I can't tell you. I know they're going there and I'm not always make it. But I do think we're starting, and I'm starting to make time. And for example, I was doing some indoor climbing. So, bouldering.
Interesting.
And I have a teammate. And some people I know that are developers or we have a prop tech. Well, they're also into climbing and bouldering. And so instead of making a meeting where we're sitting down at the office, we say, you know what? We can meet on Saturday. Let's meet on Saturday and let's go climbing. And while we're climbing, we're going to chat about a lot of things. We're going to get to know each other. We're going to develop and build a relationship. We're also going to chat about the business. And we can do that right afterwards. But we're going to put that climb in. And I think that's important, that you're starting to combine, you can do a run. And I just saw somebody else who's, one of our CTO of a business guy said he's training for a marathon. And what he's done is all his other startup founders is he said, come run with me. So if you want a one-on-one meeting with me, I'm not going to take a one-on-one meeting with you sitting down. We're now going to do this running. So our next edition of this, when I come back again in 6 months or a year, Molly and I are going to go for a run. And I don't know how we're going to do the video call, but we're going to do we're going to do the interview over again for a half-hour run along the town.
Okay, that's the deal. 6 months. Okay. Yes, because I do lots of my meetings like that as well in Hyde Park, just walking, talking, and making some notes.
Yeah.
It's boring at the same time, not to sit and drink and eat and.
Well, you don't feel great the next day.
Yes, that's true.
And it's hard to fit it all in. So.
Yes, amazing. Thank you so much for all the insights, all your wisdom you shared today. Do you want to give some last piece of advice to our subscribers? You have to subscribe to the channel.
I think it's overall, I think there's no one, I think people get caught up in too many different things and getting torn in too many different directions. And I think people have to focus on a balance, right?
Yeah.
So your work is one side of your balance, and that's your financial health. And you've got to make sure that that's there. You can't forget about it. You also have to make sure that your physical health is there. You have to make sure that the mental health is there. Finding time for you, finding time to be social. And I think having all that balance, it is critically important for everything you.
Yes, I think as we talked before, socializing is very important.
Yes.
Yes, going back to the office.
I think, some people are like, I don't want to do, I want to do the work from home forever. I think it's very important that people are, back in the office or back being social. You could be an entrepreneur, but go find that social atmosphere where it's maybe a co-working a couple of days a week, or you're at a cafe, or you're making sure you're around other people, because that mental health, that stimulation for being around other people is so important. We are social creatures.
Yes, I'm reading a book right now. It's called Lost Connections. And one of the reasons of depression is loneliness.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's why, it's very, very important to be among your...
And I think the Wall Street Journal did a good article a while back that my brother sent to me, is about, men in particular, when they reach kind of middle age and they have kids, they lose a lot of their connections. And, I had a conversation with my business partner about it. It's like, you have kids, you're a dad, and your focus goes from being, you have your work life and your home life, and you lose a lot of, your friends have all moved out to the suburbs or they've moved away. You don't get that time to yourself to kind of go out and hang out and just be purely social as much. And there was a big, there's an article that was about, how that was leading to depression. And, you have to actually take the time, break the cycle, and making sure that you're doing, some time for yourself to spend time, with that social element. And making that a critical portion of your mental health, just as you would your physical health. Like, you'll make time to go to the gym. You'll find out a time. Well, you have to make time to be social.
Yes. Yeah. And mental health is very important. Yes. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you. And
thanks for having me.
6 months.
Yeah, we're going to do a run. Yes.
Okay. Let's wait. I think it will be too cold in London. No?
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, do you want to try one of these?
Yes.
You like ginger, right?
Yes.
Ginger. So we have also CBD. I don't know.
Mighty ginger and chili shot. Let's do that. It's Unrooted.
I'm doing another one. Oh, Unrooted. So it's from Zimbabwe. Baobab trees.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. See you. Oh.
It's good.
Yeah, it's strong.
Spicy. Yeah, it's strong. Yeah.
Like tequila, but better.
It's a healthy version of tequila shot.
Bye.